Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Beware the Artist. I am Jeremy Jersa, and with us this week we have Shawn Harris. So, Shawn, if you want to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do.
I'm Shawn Harris. What do I do? Oh man, other than like play Super Mario Odyssey, that's probably not what you want to hear about. I started my career in public as a singer in a punk band called the Matches from Oakland, California. We signed to Epitaph and spent about 10 years touring the world. And and then most recently, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been illustrating picture books for kids. I'm actually working on a graphic novel right now. So maybe splitting the audience. When I started playing as in the Matches, I thought, well, wow, I'm like playing to the youngest audience possible. There were like 14 year olds in the crowd moshing, and Elmer's gluing their hair up into mohawks, but yet it turns out I found an audience even younger than those for my latest stuff.
That's hilarious. That's absolutely
It's
hilarious.
really actually funny navigating the two worlds, because I do still record music largely for adults, and then I make the books. And I find that on my Instagram now I have a bunch of followers that are following my picture book illustration work. And so when I want to post something like recently, a month ago, I put out like a 6-song mixtape. I have to kind of be like, okay, well, this is like, I basically have to give a verbal rating system in my comment when I'm being like, this one's for adults. There's like explicit mentions of sex here, and yeah, I kind of end up like being the whatever the FCC for myself. I don't want one audience to like stumble into the other and be like, wait, where are we? What is this hell?
Do you find
So
kids actually kind of following you on Instagram from the storybooks?
it's mostly their parents on that platform. Yeah, there's sort of a gatekeeper, but I do have to alert those gatekeepers, because for instance, I'll post about the Matches, the documentary about the Matches called Bleeding Audio that just came out, and I'll get a bunch of people saying, oh, a film about you. And I'm like, well, it's kind of, I mean, it is, I'm in it, and it's sort of, just maybe wait till the kids go to sleep for that one. It's such a funny thing to navigate, but that's where I'm at. Yeah.
So how did you and the Matches kind of get your start?
Let's see. We were a band. I met the guys in high school. They actually formed in elementary school originally.
That
But they
young
mostly
crowd.
played. Yeah, yeah. They mostly played. They played covers until they met me. And their best story from before I was a part of the band was playing I Used to Love Her, But I Had to Kill Her for the 5th grade talent show, I think it was, and getting stopped in the middle of the song. Yeah, I joined the band, and then we started writing originals in high school. A couple of those originals ended up on our first record that we eventually, in our early 20s, ended up signing to Epitaph. So a couple of those early songs that we wrote when we were 14 or 15 ended up on there, which is pretty wild.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, so I've been doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say the whole writing process was like for you? How did you guys get into actually kind of writing these songs?
I mean, we were a garage band first, meaning that like, you know, we mostly like to get together and play Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and like,
Which was just
you know,
re-released.
after school. Yeah, yeah. I know, everything's coming full circle, right? We mostly just wanted an excuse to like decompress after school. And we weren't much good until, well, arguably I don't know when we got much good, but people got interested in us after we graduated high school. We weren't really like much of a thing. I remember there was a band called Link 80 that one of the guys went to our high school, and they were just like my like punk rock idols because like they existed in my world. One of the guys overlapped with me in high school, and they were playing shows when they were that age. Like we never, we would throw shows in like our own backyards, or if someone's parents went out of town or something, we'd try to play for 20 people in a basement or something. But yeah, it wasn't until after high school that we like started trying to record these songs that we had already played for 6 or 7 years. It wasn't until recording the songs that I realized that as a lyricist, I had to like sing the same thing
Mm.
every time on a song. So I would just kind of like, I would just like basically freestyle over over punk songs. Nobody, it's so loud, and like we had bad PAs, so nobody could really tell what you were saying. I knew there were certain parts that I would like sing the same, but a verse would come and I would just kind of spout gibberish into the microphone and nobody noticed. So it wasn't until till we started recording the songs and people were like, what are you actually saying? And I'm like, well, you want to know what I'm saying? And then I started realizing that if we were going to get anywhere, I had to spend a little time with the pen.
So do you see any connection between your kind of music making process and your kind of studio art making, work?
I mean, there are some big similarities in that, uh, you know, I'm, freelance, i.e., I work for myself in both fields, which is awesome because, if I want to like go on a surf trip, I don't have to ask anybody and I can just pick up and go and bring my iPad and hope that I record some music or draw while I'm gone too. But, it comes back and bites me as well. Case in point, this month when I've got basically a chart that's just mapping out 16-hour drawing days, and I'm like, oh my god, how am I going to get to February 1st? But I'm pretty good about making deadlines for myself. I've learned that, and trying to be a good boss, which turns out being a good boss just means like, you know, making reasonable expectations for myself, which I didn't always have. I have a habit of really kind of over tiring myself. I remember that
Mm.
back in the day too, just like going on 3 or 4 days of no sleep to get something finished before some deadline that I can't even remember why it even mattered, but you know, you figure
Yeah,
it out.
yeah, I'm with you. I tend to spread myself way too thin.
That's it.
Yeah. So at what point did you kind of start to go into the illustration work? What were you doing in terms of, outside of the music? Because that started to happen for you pretty young, kind of going into
Yeah,
the music industry.
I mean, I've always kind of, it was before the music that I thought I was going to be an artist. I mean, as a kid, I wanted to be an animator and go work for Disney or something like that. And it wasn't until honestly getting rejected into, I wanted to go to CalArts to learn animation, but I had basically no computer background, and I didn't take life drawing classes in high school. And I found out once I submitted, they were like, "Oh, you have some cool, like, excuse me, character design stuff, but come back in a year after you take some like junior college
Mm.
courses and apply again." And it was really that year that I was so frustrated because I'd kept my grades up and did everything that I thought was possible, but my school wasn't very like arts oriented. They were like, it was a Catholic high school that was really proud of like feeding students into like the UC system,
Mm.
um and so yeah, I just didn't have the art background that I wish I did in retrospect. However, it was because of that year when I was supposed to be focusing on making my art resume better that that's when the matches took off.
Yeah.
So I can't be too revisionist about it because it's a whole different sliding glass door if I go
So,
that way.
so what's going on
Yeah.
in when you have these 16-hour drawing days?
Hmm.
What's kind of going on in the studio for you? Do you have music playing? Do you have your drinks lined up? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to stuff according to mood, and right now I'm working on a graphic novel. So let's see, this past week, I went from listening to saw music, the instrument that's like it's like a working saw, but you bend it and play it with a violin
Oh
bow.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I, it was like briefly a popular instrument during like early sci-fi film. It's not like moon music that
Mhm.
there's a great movie called Delicatessen that has like the most amazing saw scene in it. Anyway, I've been listening to saw music this week because there's a bunch of stuff set on the moon in this graphic novel. I wanted to get into that mode. I've also been listening to there was like a caving scene, and I wanted some like the sound of kind of like broken gems and just off kilter stuff. So I was listening to Arco, which is like a Venezuelan um, kind of. She's like a sound sculptress from Venezuela. She just recently released an album that's 100 songs. Well, it's one song remixed by artificial intelligence 100 different ways.
Whoa.
uh, and actually it came from an art installation that she did where uh, the AI, basically the algorithm will take her sounds and remix them infinitely. And she also made a video that's an infinite remix of the video that goes with the infinite remixes of the song. It's pretty wild stuff. So it's really like break my brain music.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't usually listen when I'm working on this stuff. I can't usually listen to like lyric heavy stuff, like
Mhm.
lyric based stuff, because then that activates my songwriting brain. And when I hear like a line that I think is like, and when I hear like a good line, then I start wanting to write like that in my head and going, oh, what if I said something like this? Oh, that reminds me of this thing that I did, and then I get distracted.
Mhm.
So, yeah, mostly instrumental when I'm drawing, but I do listen to a lot of bands when I'm not drawing.
Mm. It was funny. I was talking to another artist, and they were telling me they they like to listen to NPR while they're painting, and then we kind
I
of got
can do that. I
we
can
we
do
we
that.
got into a
Yeah.
conversation about how many paintings or how many works of art do you think are made from listening to Terry Gross's Fresh Air? And my mind was kind of blown. I was like, this is wild. This is absolutely
Totally.
wild.
I
But
know.
I love the fact that oh, what were you saying?
Wouldn't that be great if like works of art could be geotagged in some way so you could find out where they came from?
Yeah, yeah.
It wouldn't be great. I mean, that's dystopian, but like interesting also. Yeah.
I would love to see a show just kind of, titled Fresh Air, and then just see all the paintings just all
See
at
everything
once.
that was painted
Yeah.
during. Yeah, yeah. One episode even would be even more interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So do you want to talk more about this graphic novel that you have kind of working on?
Or no, the show's titled Gross,
Oh yeah, that would be great too.
but it's all Terry inspired. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the graphic novel that you're working on, what's
Yes.
what's going on there?
It's called the first cat in space ate pizza. It is a right when the stay-at-home orders of quarantine started last year. Um, my good friend, my oldest friend, my childhood friend, who's also an author, a children's book author, Mac Barnett. He's the kind of the reason why, as an artist, I kind of like hovered in the peripheries of the book illustration world for a number of years, just because I was always Mac's friend who
Mhm.
came with him to publishing parties and stuff. So like my picture book agent, I was Mac's friend who had a Super 8 camera that shot his wedding, and I was like, you know, Mac's friend at like a picture book retreat at Carson Ellis and Cullen Malloy's house or whatever. Like I was always like I like I was an artist, and one day someone will ask me to do a book with them. I just kind of felt it, and eventually it happened. My first book was with a guy named Dave Eggers, who writes mostly novels for adults, but wrote a picture book and saw my work and thought it would be good for it, so it happened eventually. But what was the beginning of your question? Because I've really like taken a left turn with my mind cart here.
Yeah, so the graphic novel that you're
Oh,
working
the
on.
graphic novel.
Yeah.
That's right. At the beginning of quarantine, all of these, like basically our audience for our picture books were all stuck at home going like, oh, what do we do? And this is before they like organized school, and parents were like, we can't do our jobs. And so we started doing a show. It was we called it Live Cartoons, and weekly we would like perform a cartoon on Saturdays that was like kind of a cross between it was kind of a paper doll puppet show. I was using a lot of animation tricks, but I was also just like kind of panning over a lot of still images while me and Mac did all the voices. So he would write the scripts, I would draw all week, and we would do this. And there was just this kind of like paused world for a couple months there. And so all these parents just started like parking their kids in front of these things every week, to get 15 minutes to go like, you know, uh, return emails or do the dishes or whatever it was that
Yeah.
was not getting done the rest of the week. And it was this really weird at this time when community was just dashed because we weren't able to see people. We made this like really, we were part of this really cool community that just popped up surrounding like, what do we do with our kids right now? And yeah, we were like the entertainers for a little bit of that period. And then we ended up writing this kind of wild moon saga that a publisher reached out to us and said, hey, you want to turn that into a graphic novel? We want you to. So now we're making that. It's
That's
pretty
brilliant.
exciting. The show ended up being basically our our rough draft, our sketch, our outline of what the book is, and now we're like really going in depth, and it's really fun. We actually released to tie my two the two what do I want to call it, these practices, to tie my two practices of art and music together. We actually recorded an album because each episode had a song in it that we were also producing, that I was also producing at the same time, and we put out the album. Probably when we drop the graphic novel, we'll put out the album on vinyl. The band is Shawn and Mac, pretty on the nose, and Mac made it. And the album is called The First Cat in Space Ate Pizza. And I promised my music fans that at the beginning of 2020 that I would put out an album in 2020, and then I ended up dropping a kids album. So I felt like I was really neglecting the adults, but they could take it. But then a month ago, I put out some more music for adults too, under my solo moniker, which is St. Ranger. Whenever I have to explain like what I'm working on, it seems so complicated. Like, geez, it's like if you wanted to follow me, like where do you even just say one thing, Shawn? Stop doing all this stuff.
Well, that's kind of one thing about your career that I kind of absolutely love, is that you've embraced this artist lifestyle in a certain sense. You have all these different facets of what are kind of pivoting from one to another, and like you're constantly creating. I would like to take a
Thank you.
moment
I
to
appreciate that. You would think that I would be good. Sorry, but you would think that I would be good at multitasking because all these things seem to happen, but like I can't at all. I just like I can only focus on one thing until it's done, and like get it done. I put it out, and that's the point. I realized a long time ago that putting out a project that you've worked on, uh, it's it's hard. It's like the project is done, and you want to like revel and bask in this like sense of completion, but it means that you have nothing else to do. So I've found the best way to deal with that is just to like wildly pivot into the next project. So I never have to deal with the existential dread of like, how are people receiving this work? Like, I don't want to think about that. Sorry, I cut you off. Where were we going?
No, it's fine. It kind of, it flows kind of nicely into this next question. Just taking a minute to talk about Saint Ranger itself, because
Yeah,
that whole process of, loading yourself up in an airstream and recording and traveling. I think I even saw a video of you recording in like a cave, like a little
yeah, yeah,
crevice
yeah,
at
yeah,
some point. That it's just such a kind of full blown experience. But at the same time, you're forcing yourself to isolate and then focusing on that one project. So I think that
yeah,
kind of that kind of fills into that kind of mode of working that you were talking about.
yeah. Totally. At that time, I was done. I was done with Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Um, I moved there, met a bunch of great people. So many great musicians lived there, but I just like I needed to escape before I became a Los Angeles uh, resident. Like in my own head, I just had to escape that for whatever reason, and I got really excited about a friend gave me a field recorder, like a Zoom field recorder, and I was like, what? Like the world sounds awesome in stereo. So for like a week, I walked around LA with this field recorder with my headphones plugged into it, and was just like, ah, stereo, stereo, everything. And then as I got really into that, and at the same time, we were fixing up an old Airstream trailer, and we finished fixing that up. Me and my girlfriend at the time got married, and we drove to Texas and got married, and then just got in that Airstream and didn't come home for 2 years. Well, we didn't have a home for 2 years, I suppose is the technical way of putting that. um, that was great. Yeah, you know, it's I don't know. It's not that different than what I'm doing now. I mean, I sit at the same desk a lot more now that I don't know that I could focus on a graphic novel with all that world in front of me. But for that
Mhm.
project, when I was going and collecting sounds, it was like I felt like it was my job to go on a hike and try to like see what a hummingbird sounded like,
Right, right.
and put that all on the record. But then that record became sort of the picture of what that was, and I pivoted pretty hard off of that into illustrating my first picture book too. So yeah.
So your friend Mac, you guys, you've written and illustrated kind of things together. Um,
Yeah, we just put out our first official project together was called A Polar Bear in the Snow, as a picture book, and it came out in fall of this year. Yeah,
so what's that book about?
it's pretty on the nose. It's about a polar bear who is in the snow. It stemmed from an idea that I had actually with an illustration. So uh, I guess yeah, because of our friendship, it worked a little different. I drew a picture uh, and asked Mac like, "Hey, how would you go about writing this?" Because you know, I can, I think of myself as a writer. In fact, back in the day when I used to be on tour with the matches, and we would be, like living in a bus in Europe on a tour or something like that, and people would ask me, "Oh, what do you do?" When it wasn't in the context of, excuse me, when it wasn't in the context of the music venue, I didn't really like the way people looked at me when I said I was in a band. So I would just always tell people I was a writer, and then if the conversation like progressed, then I would you know elucidate that I was a songwriter. But otherwise, yeah, I would just keep it. I'm a writer. So I've thought of myself as a writer since I figured out that I had to write words if we are going to record songs instead of sing scat. But you know, writing a book is a different beast, and illustrating a graphic novel, and like I'm basically writing the pictures to Mac's dialogue. So it's all there. But yeah, Mac is like has always been like the guy um the guy like typing the words ever since we were ever since we were young. He was like the writer one, and I would be the illustrator. Yeah, but I also have a couple of books coming out now that I've written. I've learned a lot from him.
Hmm.
A polar bear in the snow was basically the start of me trying to figure out how he does what he's doing, and at the point that he gave me as many suggestions as he did for the book, I was like, yeah, it feels like you kind of wrote that. You didn't really leave much for me to say there. Do you want to just put your name on it? So
So in that whole process, how do you, I mean, I'm sure it's easier when you're working with a friend, but in other circumstances, how do you go about kind of staying true to the author's vision and then kind of putting enough of yourself into these illustrations?
well, I, it's a good question because it's something that I always think about. Um, but I've decided that the answer is that I should put like never. The answer is to not think about that question as much as it's tempting to think about. I just kind of go all the way, and I think, look, if the author sees my interpretation of their work and it's not reflective of what they were thinking and they don't like it, I hope that they can tell me that, or fire me and find somebody else for the job. but I like to but I like to think about. I do think a lot about uh, you know making the illustrations serving the idea that they're interested in. And while that may mean at times not drawing exactly what they've specified on the page, like sometimes it's a complimentary image, sometimes it's not exactly like he was holding a cup, and then you see someone holding a cup, they might the sentence might say, and he was holding a cup, uh and then I draw someone who's thirsty looking up at a shadow, like
Hmm.
it may be something like that, but like I'm also trying to delight the author. Kind of, there's a sort of a game within a game where I'm not trying to like surprise them and be contrarian, but I want them to be like, whoa, like there's more depth here than when the words left as a manuscript.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
It almost becomes that kind of fourth dimension of realizing the work that they've envisioned in a certain sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really great thing that happened. This happens with bands too. Like when St. Ranger is largely me uh, playing music with myself. So there's a sound that St. Ranger has, and I do have some musicians come in. For instance, my wife played drums on my latest 6 or 7 songs that I put out. But it's like largely I'm like heavily producing, or like basically like writing the drum part and being like, hey, play it like this, and then I get her vibe on it, and her take is like sort of the sound, but I'm still kind of composing it. But like with a band like the Matches, those songs I can't control how they release that, because I'm not going to go and like, it's just the dynamic of that band. I can suggest to Justin Sansucci how the kind of a vibe for a bass line, or suggest he turns on a distortion pedal or something, but like there's no way that I'm gonna like write a part that he's gonna play, just because he has such a distinct style to his playing. So
Mhm.
I kind of feel that way about illustrators and working with authors, is that I'm sort of their unruly bass player, or their drummer, or their band. Basically, they've written some lyrics and a cool melody, and then I get to come in and like decide when to get out of the way and when to come in and hit hard, and
Mhm.
yeah.
I think that's a great metaphor. It becomes an orchestra. You have
Yeah,
moving parts, and they all create this one unified vision, kind of moving forward.
exactly.
Um,
And when you're
So
involving people, you have to be a little careful involving people, because need to involve the right people, but one, like if like John Devoto from the Matches, to use another one of those examples, can like rip a guitar solo, like, so like, do I, like, he's not going to be the right guitar player on everything,
Uh-huh.
but like when it's there's because I I'll write a song, and like you can imagine, like at this point, I've got a batch of songs that I send to the Matches. Believe it or not, we actually have written more music. Hopefully post COVID, when we get vaccinated and everything, we can get together and actually record some of it. It's been a while. It's been a while since we've recorded, but yeah, there are songs that I write still that get put into a Matches pile because I'm like, oh man, like some cool guitar and bass and drum stuff has to happen there. That's going to be a Matches song. I can feel it. And then there's other stuff that ends up like on the St. Ranger release where I like, it's just kind of clear to me, like, well, if I'm not going to use those guys, if I already have a guitar lead in my head or something like that, I'm not going to give it to John Devoto, because I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, here's exactly what all of you have to do. That makes it St. Ranger. And
Hmm.
sometimes I know what all the instruments should do, so I just make that my own. And when I have question marks and I'm like, this is the vibe, then that goes to the band, but like, yeah. And then so you become like this sort of executive producer where you're deciding which group of people make the right sound for this thing. Yes, yes. And sometimes, and it doesn't always work out. Like there are a couple Matches songs that we like tried to record year after year, and we just couldn't get it right. And I was like, let me try that with Maniac, or let me try that with my solo stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
sometimes you don't put the right piece in there and you get it wrong, but it's pretty clear when something's not quite landing. If it's kind of, I feel like there's like you have to, as an artist, you work at your craft and do a lot of work that never ends up being published. Like most of the songs I start writing don't get finished. Most, they end up like 4 lines and like an interesting melody that sits in a voice note for years and I forget about. Most drawings that I do are me like practicing drawing 50 versions of a character, trying to find the perfect stance to
Hmm.
put in the book or whatever, and you just keep on doing that. But uh, you know, what, I don't know where I was going with that. Most stuff doesn't get used.
I feel like that's that's most artists' studio practice. That's one thing I always have to reiterate to my students is that
Right.
you know, you're only seeing at these shows or in the museums or on Instagram, you're seeing a curated view of what this artist is producing. Not everything
Yes.
leaves the studio. Not everything is a gold, shiny, polished thing to throw out there into the world. And I feel as though
Yeah.
so many creatives, they forget that sometimes, and then it becomes this kind of they beat themselves up over and over
Well,
again.
yeah, yeah. Once deadlines get involved, I think that's why you find like sophomore slumps in albums and stuff.
Mhm.
Like the freshman album is never on a deadline because there's no fans, there's no one demanding it, there's no label. It's always the second record when you're like, we've got these 14 songs, the album has to be 12 of them. Like the the thing about doing all the iterations, like art and making music is not, it's not it's not easy, and you do a lot of it to separate the, what is that aphorism, the wheat from the chaff or whatever it is. I don't even know what chaff is, but anyway, hopefully it's not inappropriate. If you But you do all this work, and then but the good ones, I will say, like the good illustrations, the good songs usually end up being the easy ones. So you kind of just have to be water and just roll with the hills. If something feels like you're playing 5 songs with a band and one of them is like really fun, and you finish it pretty simply, and like, that's the direction we got to head, because like that would felt good. It was exciting. It was, quote unquote easy. Now to finish the song, to like actually produce it right and program all the right drums and like get the vocal take just right, that can be like arduous and hard. So like, but there's a point in the creation process, uh when I think, when I always know like, oh, this is going to be really good. Now you can take a hard song or a hard idea that you've been like laboring over and laboring over and laboring over, and like keep improving it to the point where it gets on par with some other good work. But like, I feel like I can always listen to the record and know which tunes were easy for the band to make, and those are the ones
Uh-huh.
I always tend to enjoy listening to.
Are
Yeah.
there any songs that you're just like, I can't believe we put that out, and I'm ashamed of
Oh
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, most of them.
Really?
um yeah, I mean, I don't know. I my style of my style of lyric writing is like, if it doesn't feel like I'm not going to regret having said it, it doesn't quite feel like, it's kind of like, when when you're eating, and like, I like spicy food, and like when you get used to spicy food, you're like, if it doesn't burn, like, did I even have lunch? Like, if my
Right,
mouth
right.
doesn't hurt, I kind of feel that way about songwriting sometimes, where it's just like, if it doesn't hurt to get it out, if it doesn't like, if I don't immediately wish that I didn't put that person's real name in the song, or whatever thing it is, like, does it matter if I wrote it at all? Like, so, yeah, I don't know. And it's funny, like, uh, yeah, I don't know. I've never put, I've never put out music and gone like, "Oh, I can't wait for everybody I know to hear this." I'm like, oh, why did I put that out?
Oh, that's great. That's great. So,
Yeah.
are there kind of do you look back at this documentary that's coming out and you just say, "Wow, I'm completely embarrassed."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My face was so red in the back of that theater. Um, we got to we played after, one of the, I think the first screening, um, up in the Bay Area, like right before COVID hit. And yeah, I was sitting in the back of the theater. We did a Q&A afterwards, and I honestly felt like I was on like some heavy hallucinogens. I was like, this is wild, man. Like, the room was kind of spinning, and everybody watched this weird version of my life that I didn't, I mean, like, yeah, it wasn't the story of how I would tell my own story. I mean, I guess I probably wouldn't tell my own story. So it's kind of neat that someone made it, but like, yeah, it was weird. It was a weird experience. I mean, you know, if you can get through life without seeing a movie, largely about your life, like, you're doing all right, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
I
um
mean, yeah, there was like the climax of the movie didn't revolve around like a heroin overdose, so that was like, I guess it could have been worse, but
yeah, yeah.
there was a lot of me in that movie, like, really earnestly trying to sound like Tim Armstrong, which is so embarrassing. I mean, his voice sounds cool on him and him alone, but
Mhm.
I was like, really wanted people to think I was a punk on Epitaph Records, and guess what? I was. I didn't
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
talk like the other punk on Epitaph Records. Yeah. Okay.
I think
Yep.
when I actually when I saw you live when you came to I'm from Baltimore. Saw
Hmm.
you guys play in Maryland at the Record Theater, which closed down and recently just opened back up. But I think it was a Epitaph tour. I think it was you guys, Escape the Fate, The Hire,
Yep.
um, and I think there was another band actually. But I can't remember completely.
From first to last.
From first to last. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a great kind of group anyway.
AKA what would become Skrillex. Yeah.
So strange. So
Right.
strange. Another artistic pivot, we'll say.
Big time. Yeah.
Um
Well, I say big time, but then also like, yeah, duh, obviously. That kid was so talented. He just joined the band on that tour. If I can like just detour real quick to
Yeah, yeah.
talk about Sonny just really quick. He had just joined the band. He was like doing homeschooling stuff on the tour because he was still high school aged. And he replaced a former singer that was in the band. So he was like kind of playing music that he didn't write with the band, but then he was working with them on writing the next record. Uh, and he's like 15 years old or something like that. It's like a little pimple faced kid, and he he could play. I remember at sound check one night, we were kind of like, who is this? Like, the like screamo scene wasn't really my jam. I was more of like a power pop like Weezer kid,
Mhm.
So I was sort of like, cool, I get it, Warped Tour. But like he came up on stage and none of his band were around yet, and the sound check guy was ready to sound check, and he's like, well, I guess we could do your voice because Sonny's 15 and he sings. So he's like, okay, and he checks his voice, and then the guy's like, where's the rest of your band? He's like, I don't know. You want the guitar? And the guy's like, well, I'll get the guitar. I kind of want to hear it sound like it does in the song. And he's like, oh, no problem. He picks up their lead guitar player's song and just like rips like a double like two-hand tapping like guitar solo from one of their songs. And I was like, what? Like, that's some it was like it was such a prodigy move. Like, what? This kid is so young and he could play the guitar like that. He's like, you want the drums? He goes and kills the drums for one of their songs. He's like, you want the bass? And he goes and plays the bass. I'm like, what? And then like I saw him play piano on that tour too, and he was just like playing Mozart on some piano backstage, and was like, who is this? So like, when he became as influential as he did in the electronic music scene, I was like, he can do anything, you guys. Like, careful, he can do anything.
That's absolutely wild.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, are there any gigs for you that really just kind of stand out in your mind as just kind of when you're looking back in your memories and you go, that was a top night for me?
Hmm. Um. Yeah, like I would always get a little queasy recount like playing the same show more than once. But it's impossible to ignore the fact that like as a tour progresses, your stage patter, the banter on stage, like everything, like you can dial it in to be like really effective with a crowd. So I see why it happened, like why bands do it, why it happens that like Green Day says the same thing in between every song in all all
Yeah,
50
yeah.
shows that they do in the United States, but like on a tour. But like I don't know, maybe it was because I knew like people were traveling to some of our stuff to see 3 or 4 shows in a region or something, but like I would always like the broken shows where things fell apart or wouldn't go as planned. And I would kind of honestly try to break shows myself
Mhm.
by like hopping in the crowd and like crowd surfing to a point where I knew I couldn't get back to my guitar when it was just me playing, so that like John had to like really quick like play something similar to my part that I knew he didn't know. Like we would always kind of do things to just like slightly break the show. We were never a tight live band, but I think we were a pretty interesting live band, um, because we liked things kind of coming off the rails and being a bit punk rock in that regard. Because then at least if you one a show that I remember like really vividly that I didn't play was uh was well, no, we were on tour with this band, so another like a band I was on tour with thing. But we were on tour with Real Big Fish, and their their crowd, like notoriously, like a third of their audience only knew like their 2 radio songs. They knew "Sell Out" and "Beer," and their crowd would kind of like notoriously shout for those songs even after the band played them. And one night on the tour we were on with them. This was our first national tour too, so I was like very, I was just watching them going like, oh, how do you like command a room full of 2,500 kids? Like how do you do that? And we were standing outside of the stage, and somebody shouted for "Sellout" right after they played "Sellout." He's like, we just played it, and then the drummer just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they played "Sellout" twice in a row. It was funny. We were like, ha. and then they played Beer, and then they were, you want Sell Out again? They played Sell Out again. They played Beer again. They played Sell Out, Beer, Sell Out, Beer, Sell Out, Beer. And then like the crowd, like there was a dip when the crowd was like, oh no, they're gonna play these two songs for an hour and a half. Like, what have we
Oh my
done?
God.
We've ruined our night. And like the crowd got bummed. Like people went to the bathroom. Like people were getting drinks, sitting down, talking. It was the weirdest. Nobody was like skanking or dancing or whatever they do at Real Big Fish shows anymore. And then like they got past this lull and the band was like, no, we're powering through. Like they did this to themselves. We're making a point. They powered through it. And then like people like returned to the dance floor and then they would like, they knew what was going on and then like got back into it. The band went off stage. They came on for an encore. The crowd was back in on the joke and yelling for Sell Out again. They played Sell Out as an encore. It was amazing. It was like one of the coolest shows. And then like, so I think that mentality has always just appealed to me. You know, you hear about like things like that with like Iggy Pop or like, you know, the David Bowie just blowing shows or whatever it was, you know, but like I just like that's how it happened in my generation. It was Real Big Fish. And I saw a Papa Roach show when I was in high school where the bass player just who was it the bass player just destroyed the drum kit, like kicked it apart, but like you would for like the last song in your set, except it was the first song in their set.
Oh my God.
And they had no
Had nothing to
instruments
do.
to play anymore, so they played literally one song while they were opening. They were first of three. And I was like, that was amazing. Like, what was that band? Who were they? And yeah, I don't know, it's just super memorable. You know, I don't have any feelings about that band or their music, like, or I think I do have feelings and I don't really like them, but super memorable show, and like I kind of like them because of it. So I don't know. I was just trying to like leave a mark on people's evening, whether it was good or bad. Some of them were good. I think we played some good shows, but we weren't always trying to.
So you hinted a little bit at new Matches music. Is that going to happen?
I mean, yeah, like we before this year we had intended to get together and record an album, and for a little while we were trying to send files back and forth. I've successfully done that with like one or two musicians before, but you know, four guys with varying levels of like recording chops. A few of us are really comfortable. A couple you know, Justin's kind of like hobbyist but good, and Matt's like, what do I hit record on? So yeah, I mean, we got to get together. I also think like, you know, the sound of the matches is very much like sort of getting together, just being in the same room. It's like I mentioned before, like you don't want to like put one of those guys in a box and be like, hey, play exactly this. Like, hey, I wrote you a part. It's not how the band sounds the best. It's not really how that band works. But like, but you want to be around to influence each other too. And like this goes like from them to me too. Like they, you know, I might be like singing a song at the top of my lungs and they might be like, hey, it'd be really cool if you kind of like laid back on this one and kind of like half voiced it or like did it an octave lower, which, you know, if I spent the time recording that, got excited about it, married to it, like perfected it, comped the vocal, and then they said that, I'd be like, oh, inconvenient, you know. But if they said that when we're in practice, I'd be like, cool, let me try it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's the we got to get. We didn't always record, you know. We would sometimes record drum and bass live together, so it's not like oh mate, you've just got to be there and play it all, you just jam it out. So it's not like we're the Stones or anything. Like we would multi-track, but we would at least get the songs in the same room sounding like they could be performed live before we would then go and multi-track them. So yeah, I think we got to like lock eyes and see each other to do that album. But yeah, it's something to look forward to. We were at one point, it was like, oh, maybe when the documentary comes out, we'll put out a record simultaneously and do a little tour. But I'm glad we didn't push for that because this is not the year for it. So yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, I think with just you in general as a person, you've been extremely generous with your fans and your kind of connection to the fans. I feel as though you're always kind of open to, conversations or me contacting you for this podcast, and just kind of that back and forth,
Hmm.
even doing, tours, and you know revisiting those places and having those moments again that people can relive. Do you want to talk to how is that important to you? Is that something that just happens? What's that about?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm like, I feel like it's always, there's always the kind of like an internal conflict of like, of I mentioned like finishing something and then like needing to go on and start something new before I can tell if like did that did that work or are people liking it. Like I can't really focus on that aspect of it, but a really important part of um, a lot of my projects is like the community that may or may not develop around said project. Now, like if a community doesn't develop, I won't be watching. I don't know, but the communities that have developed around some of like these things I've done with picture books or uh, like I was talking about with the first Cat in Space, or the matches really became like this kind of like this Oakland L3 kind of this certain type of person you wouldn't be surprised to see with a matches tattoo. um like yeah, I mean those things like that kind of have a life beyond the one that I intended and then finished, like they're always end up being a totally different thing. And I'm like, I just I'm really, I feel really lucky to like be a part of them. And to yeah, try to go and I don't know, just kind of like join these clubs. Like I'm not join these clubs that I've kind of like sort of thrown a few things at that they've made something else out of. I have a record club called Pretend Record Club, where me and a friend of mine, Tim DeVille, take turns producing each other's songs, and we put it out like biannually. It was supposed to be a quarterly, but we put out a couple a year on vinyl and mail them to people. So it's like a mail order record club.
Uh-huh.
And the last song that I did, you were talking about community, and I was like, oh, here's a good place to talk about this. The last song that I did is a song called Blood Spatter, and it just came out like a week ago. Um, and I did a tarot draw from a tarot deck that I made, that I illustrated, and then had people send me sound clips that the cards divined. And I ended up using 16 submissions, and I edited them together and crafted them into an original tune that I basically wrote with all these people. And we split the royalties evenly. I split like the profit off of after we sent out the records. I sent checks to all the people that wrote on it, and like taught everyone how to do like a lot. Most of these people were not musicians
Hmm.
prior to this, so I taught them all how to set up their BMI publishing accounts via like an Instagram live. And so now all these people have publishing accounts, and they'll watch this like is sort of like a primer on like how the music industry works, but now they can like actually in real time with a statement see like the fraction of a penny that rolls in like every time 16 people listen on the Spotify. They'll get a piece of it, they'll get a penny. And like like I don't know, it's just like the communal aspect of making art, whether it be being in a band or collaborating with an author, or you know using people's samples and pieces of their life to make stuff, is like an interesting one to me, because I'm actually not that comfortable just being generally social. Like I
Hmm.
don't like to just like pick up a beer and sit on a couch and talk about stuff. Like I needed projects to do with people, but I really love people. I like to be part of a community, but like I do way better and have a lot less anxiety about it if we're making something.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I usually try to have all of my community driven stuff be based on making something. I'm not the guy that goes to like thousands of shows just to see other bands play because I'm not making anything. So it kind of stresses me out,
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah.
What's a goal that you have? Do you set goals for yourself with the projects you're working on? And if so, do you have something that's out there that you want to achieve at some point in your career?
Oh, I mean, I'm good. I just want to keep making stuff, Like
Yeah, yeah.
we like you know me and my wife uh tried to make a family and did a bunch of IVF and stuff, and that didn't work. And uh so I've like come around to this idea of like, oh, if I genetically want to pass the torch, if I want to be like, okay, here's all the stuff I learned, like now come and like learn how to make comic books with me, kid, or like come surfing with me, or here's how to play the guitar. Like I can I can I can do that by making books for kids, by like visiting schools. I can affect a lot of kids in a little way instead of a little kid in a lot of ways. Um, and I'm good with that. Like it makes me have to like I can't pass my torch anywhere. I've got to keep holding it, so I'm gonna keep
Yeah.
making stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's beautiful. That's that's the I feel like that's how most teachers feel,
Hmm.
they I know a lot of teachers that they end up not having kids because they say, I have 5,000 that have come through my classroom at some point in time, and that kind of mentoring doesn't really end for those kind of individuals, and I feel that connection that you're starting to kind of talk about,
Hmm.
passing on that information. I feel like vinyl is something that's really important to you. Do
Yeah.
you want to talk about that?
you know it's not, yeah, I love vinyl, but it's not just vinyl. It's just like I do like physical. I like the physical idea of music.
Hmm.
There's a fair bit of nostalgia just baked into me being a kid before streaming or before MP3s. And, um, you know, uh, I started my work professionally as an illustrator making album art. Now, album art isn't really a thing, it's kind of an album JPEG.
Hmm.
So, unless you make vinyl or a physical release. So I like the sound of music on vinyl. I like putting on a record and it's warm and it's warm and it crackles and it's kind of like putting a fire in the hearth. Is it actually heating your house? No, the split system that we installed is doing that, but the fire is the vibe. So I feel like vinyl is a great vibe for music,
Uh-huh.
for a lot of music that I like. But yeah, I just like the idea of of making art, making a collectible thing. And let's be honest, like um, the streaming economy supports the top 1%, 2% of artists uh, are stream enough millions of
Hmm.
billions of songs to have a a noticeable income off of it.
Yeah.
For the rest of us, we have to have our music there. But we if we're gonna break even or make any money doing this really cool activity slash hobby slash sometimes job that we do, we've got to tour. We've got to give our fans other ways to support us.
Hmm.
You know, one of those ways is putting out vinyl because there are fans that collect it, um, and like to collect it. And it's cool for me to put out an album uh, like Yvonne Dahl Kill the Locals and then see it like, see the cheapest ones selling on Discogs for $250 now. Like it's cool to have like made something that has value because it was limited and
Yeah,
people are
yeah.
like snatched it up. And if you missed it, you missed it. And
I was one of those people that
yeah.
missed it.
Ah, well, I see you got the third album there, so like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one I haven't checked on that one yet lately, but you know, it's fun to do that. I recently on my latest St. Ranger release, I actually put out a sweatsuit that was a lyric sweatsuit. So it was actually
Oh, I think I've seen
I
that.
yeah, I called it the world's most comfortable lyric book, and the lyrics to the entire mixtape are printed on the top and bottom of the sweatsuit. So yeah, if you wanted the physical release to that one, it wasn't even playable music. It was just you could read along on your pants. So yeah, I don't know, things like that. Like when artists put out like great pieces of merch, like I want them.
Mhm.
You know, like if you release bad merch or and it sucks or you know whatever, like it's not like anybody owes it to you to like, oh, I listened to you on streaming, so now I have to go buy something that I don't really need. But like, yeah, if there are enough collectors, and then if you put out cool stuff, people support you, and then that money comes to you, and then you can actually, like, as an indie artist, via that, or maybe like touring when that comes back. Although like I have really little aspiration to like tour heavily
Mhm.
again, meaning like do more than like weekend shows maybe.
Right,
Like
right.
I don't think that I'll ever get back, you know, knock on wood, back in like a tour bus and do 25 shows in a month ever again. But I sort of paid my dues there. But like, yeah, but like playing shows like can still be really lucrative. Like the Matches would do weekend shows when we were doing our reunion tours, and those were always really fun. And we just select our favorite locales and cities that were hopefully places that a bunch of people could drive to if we weren't their city, and you know, not lose money and have a good time doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually I was living in Philly and you guys played the Fillmore there, and I had a friend hit me up and he's like, "Hey, I didn't get a hotel room, but can I crash it at your house?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, I just left the Matches show." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And I totally missed it and I was so pissed. But that's my bad on that part. But it was just a hilarious kind of a moment for me in my life.
Yeah.
um, so what is some advice that you would like to give to a future kind of up and coming group of creatives?
um uh, help me out, be a little more specific. Just not that that's not a question I haven't been answered before, but like
Yeah, I know I'm kind of
are we
putting you
the,
on the
do we
spot.
have like musicians in the room and artists? Are we just like talking like just generally like I'm sitting in like a middle school rec room kind of thing with a microphone in my
Well,
hand?
I would say, well, a little bit of the rec room,
Yeah.
but you know, musicians or artists or anyone that's kind of working in a creative field where it is extremely independent, and you don't have this kind of scaffolding to climb up. You're putting out your creative product. What's some advice that you have for them?
Oh man. I mean, I'd say you know, follow follow your bliss. My mom used to say that to me, and I would kind of roll my eyes. So this group of middle schoolers would probably roll their eyes at me too. So maybe I wouldn't say it, but I would like try to imply it, because that feeling, like I was saying, like the stuff that kind of comes easy, like when you just kind of like collapse your shoulders into water and follow the channels down the mountain of life, you can kind of feel which way you want to go. As as watery and woo woo as that sounds, like that's you got to follow those, you got to go follow those pathways, and that's gonna lead you to like where your your soul, and in this case your creativity, your creative soul wants to take you. It's not always going to be where you're like, you know, you might think that it's to go animate for Disney, but it's not quite. Just keep on, just like keep flowing, all of the bliss or the goosebumps or whatever you want to call that feeling. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Cool.
So if people are looking for your work, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's illustration, where might they be able to find that?
You can go to, you can either search, oh, this is where I get into, this is like where it gets all broken apart and splintered and schismed. Go to shawnharris.info, which is my website for illustration. Although you will find none of my bands there. I don't have one hub for my bands. So I'd go to St. Ranger, which is the word stranger with a period after the T. I go to St. Ranger for my solo stuff. And in whatever streaming platform you're listening to, you can go. Oh, you know what? Go find me on Instagram. It's all there. Although there is Pretend Record Club too. That's where most of my music stuff resides right now. It depends. What do you want, music or art? You can find it. Just Google Shawn Harris. Google me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Shawn, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You're a personal hero of mine, so this has been a really great experience for me. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Everyone, if you are looking for Shawn's work, make sure you go check it out, and make sure to tune in next week for our next episode of Beware the Artist. All right, see you later.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.